get here?
Writing more and doing all I can to make more.
Sorry about that, guys. Let's share this around a little bit. Share link.
So who is Yosef David marrying, engaged to? Do you know?
Her name is
You're online, by the way.
Rabbi, having a shir taught by a wine bottle tonight. Very intense.
Unity for our community.
The laws of Kiddush.
Where are you?
I don't know what a woman is. I
Well,
saw
you
her
can
name. Very thrilled for him.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Long time to get married.
While ago. There it is. That's what I want.
YouTube.
Where is he? Live any minute. Can you put this on hold? You're about to be replaced from a wine bottle.
We're getting drunk, partying. For him.
You are live.
You told everybody to have a joyous meal. But you couldn't come. You told everybody to have a joyous meal. They couldn't make it.
I'm going to need to use this probably. No, not yet. We're finishing first.
Go for it. You have cups here too? With us?
I'm with me. Oh, starting off with wine? Giving that wine? Okay. We'll see what comes out. I can't have a revius, otherwise I can't give the share.
Okay, I'm not going to serve him.
Give me less than a revius.
Okay.
Where'd you give this to? Just look inside.
Right, look inside. If I give any, we'll reach that after we finish 697 chapters in Orach Chayim and another 246 in Yeridea. Then we'll reach it. Okay, what we have on the menu today, we are at the end of chapter 2 of Siman Beis. We began last week discussing, what's that? We began last week discussing the yarmulke, which is discussed in the and we're going to fully cover all that. There's a lot of information here regarding the yarmulke, a lot of different questions that we will address as we will see tonight. Last week we concluded with a few stories emphasizing the importance of the yarmulke and how it, we mentioned the story with Rabbi Akiva and that little boy whose yarmulke fell, walked around without a yarmulke while playing ball, who in the end was discovered to be Ashka. We mentioned that story. We mentioned also some of the Talmudic sources which discusses a head covering, but we said the sources that we mentioned, which were in the Gemara and Kedushin, they really record it in reference to is a Talmud Chacham wearing it or a person who's married wearing the head kerchief, a man who's married wearing the kerchief.
Can I ask, what's the genesis of yarmulke? What kind of word is yarmulke?
It's Yiddish. I'm very in English now.
So I was just curious where it
And I've heard it said by a number of Goyim. They say the word yarmulke. Yeah. Israelis don't know it. They won't even know what the word means.
That's what I was wondering.
They use the word kippah. But yeah, it's 100% synonymous, yarmulke, kippah. here in the halacha, I wrote all three: skull cap, yarmulke, kippah, and head covering, just to cover any terminology that a person. Oh, kippah is from covering. A cover, like kippat barzel. You know, this is also called a kippah. It's a covering. All of the freilich and purim. Okay, katan. So let's begin now. We're going to go through methodically all the different points and halachas involved. So the first thing I want to deal with is the reasons/sources. So far, Talmudically, what we went through sounds like it's a very weak source because the source we found is sort of only giving it to married people, Torah scholars, only they have to wear it. But in truth, it's possible that the Gemara, we said this last week, was not referring to an actual yarmulke, but a hat, a like covering on top of the covering that everyone wore. So that's a possible way of understanding the Gemara, as some of Farshim bring. So we don't really have a source either way from the Talmud, as it's unclear. Aside, of course, for the story of the kid who didn't have his yarmulke on, but that's just a story. It's not actually saying that it's a requirement, although you could learn from the story of the importance of wearing a yarmulke. In Tanakh, absolutely no reference about wearing a yarmulke in Tanakh. No. That's one of the priestly garments. In fact, guess what? He wasn't allowed to wear a yarmulke. He could only wear. I mean, you have to get used to this stuff. When you're going to put on your arba begadim, or if you become the kain gadol, the shmeina begadim, then the halach is you can't wear anything else. You're going to have to take off your tzitzis, the undershirt, no undergarments, nothing, just those 4 clothing. That's it. Nothing on top and nothing on bottom. It's a very severe issur. So you can't wear your yarmulke. That turban will be your yarmulke. Already now. Okay.
Goldstein?
Yes.
All the way from England, Manchester.
Oh, wow. You're welcome to join. Sit down. Okay, so let us begin. The wearing of the head coverings of Jewish customs dating back thousands of years. It is recorded in the Talmud as a simple difference as Jew from a Gentile. And the following are the reasons brought down. And with the reasons, we will discover, is this a requirement? Is this just a minhag? What is its level of severity? So there's 4 reasons recorded in the Poskim behind why we wear a yarmulke. The Mechaber just mentions we do it. He doesn't go into why we do it. Well, he says they cover the Shechina, but in terms of its level of severity. So number 1 is the Alte Rebbe writes in the Madura Basra, in his second version of the Shulchan Aruch, that it is worn due to reasons of modesty, of tznius, which means the following. Let me explain what that means. Just like we already learned in the beginning of this chapter, that any area of the body that is commonly covered, it needs to be always covered. You're not allowed to reveal it even in privacy, right? It always has to be covered. And the Alte Rebbe holds of the position that this is an obligation. It's not just a matter of piety, as other poskim hold, or as he himself sort of held in the Madura Kama, but it's an actual obligation. So too regarding the yarmulke. Since it has become the practice of Jews to always wear a head covering, a yarmulke, so therefore this area under the head covering is considered a modest area that's always covered. And by uncovering it, you're uncovering a part of your body. So that is the first novelty of the Alte Rebbe's Madura Basra, that number 1, there's an aspect of okay. So that's one approach, and this is the most stringent approach that we have of the yarmulke, that it is an actual chiyuv. It's not just a chiyuv due to a minhag, it's an actual chiyuv irrelevant to any other factor, because it now becomes the covering of a modest area which cannot be uncovered, which would, by the way, also tell us, based on this reason, that even in the privacy of your own home, you can't take off your yarmulke. If we go by the other reasons, which we'll mention soon, you could say, well, those reasons don't apply in the privacy of my own home. But this reason does apply. It's just like, walking around in boxers, which you can't do in your own home according to the Alte Rebbe. It's an isser min adin. Second reason, in the Gemara with that student that we mentioned that threw off his yarmulke while he was playing ball. So, and we also mentioned last week the story with the mother of Binachman Bar Yitzchak, who always made sure to cover his head when he was playing ball, and that would counteract the astrologer's prediction that he would be a wild rebel, causing a lot of problems for Judaism. Then became a big Amayra, Binachman Bar Yitzchak. So this we clearly see from Talmudic basis that it's having a yarmulke on your head is something that brings fear of heaven, and it's a sign. It shows us a sign that there is a God on top of us. I never thought of it that way. You heard what he said? said the term yarmulke, you can write out Yira Malka, which means fear of the king. Oh. They're married. Lava Malka, yeah, the queen, God. There's a story recorded in the Likutei Diburim of the Rebbe Rayatz. The Rebbe Rayatz there writes, this story occurred in the early 1600s. There was an individual who, his grandfather was a student of the Maharal of Prague, was a huge Talmud Chacham, great Torah scholar, but he was a big Misnagid of his time, one of the original Misnagdim, and he hated Kabbalah and hated Musar, and he was a very dry Jew. While he himself kept religious, his son was his son went off and his grandson even worse. Basically, this individual, or maybe this was his son if I remember correctly, maybe this was his son, the person in the story. But anyways, this individual was a very strange personality because he eventually threw everything off. He married a shikhtse, he lived outside, I believe, the town of Lvov. He lived outside that town and like in the outskirts, and he was very, very wealthy, but he learned Torah all day. So he learned Torah all day, but he ate chazir and was married to a non-Jewish woman and didn't keep any of the Torah mitzvahs. And the Rabbi Leo Baal Shem, the first of the Baal Shems, right? There was Rabbi Leo, Rabbi Adam, Rabbi Yoel, Rabbi Adam, and then the Baal Shem Tov. Students was a nephew of this individual. And the Rabbi Yoel Baal Shem sent him to because his uncle had tremendous respect for Talmidei Chachamim. He would all the time house Talmidei Chachamim wayfarers who were passing by in his home and respect them, and he would learn Torah with them and give them money. But he gave him a tikkun of what to do while there. He gave him it's a very long story. To make a long story short, basically Rabbi Yatz tells over how he came to, this is a story, by the way, that was told to the Alte Rebbe by the Maggid by the Baal Shem Tov. It's a direct story. And he comes to his uncle's house, and his uncle didn't know this was his nephew. Revealed him. And he came in, and he saw his uncle learning Torah. He saw him learning, and he was learning without a yarmulke. And he said to him, how can you learn Torah without a yarmulke? How can a Jew learn Torah without a yarmulke? So what did he answer back? He answered back to him, the whole reason why we wear a yarmulke, if you take a look in the Torah, is because it's and in the Talmud is for the purpose of fear of heaven. But if someone doesn't believe in heaven, what purpose is it to wear the yarmulke? That's what he told him. So he told him back, for such words I have to do kriya, someone blaspheming God. So his uncle answered him back, that's not correct. Look in the Rambam in this chapter, in this halacha, you only do kriya when someone who believes in God blasphemes God. But someone who says he doesn't believe in God, that's not blaspheming him, it's just saying he doesn't exist. So this is this individual who was learning Torah without fear of heaven. But anyway, the way the story went is that he ended up doing a tikkun for him. The person did tshuva. He became about tshuva. The Yoel Baal Shem gave a very special procedure of what to do to help bring him back to his roots.
That comes off that. Can a person who is a man who is married to a non-Jew receive an aliyah?
There is no halacha that says a person married to a non-Jew can't get an aliyah. The same way it says there's no a person who does another aver can't get an aliyah. At the same time, someone who is not Shomer Shabbos, that's where we question whether such a person get an aliyah. A lot of shuls will not give such a person aliyah, but a lot of shuls will under the premises of a tinik shenish. But there's a long list of Poskim. I once had a student of mine who had called us out for giving someone who wasn't from an aliyah, and I made him write down about 50 different Poskim who hold its mutter. I remember, look in this place, I want you to write to me all the Poskim there is, and give me a list of like 50 Poskim. It's a machlekes. Some people are machmer, but not a machmer. Okay. So that's the second reason, fear of heaven. We are accustomed to this, it brings fear of heaven. Number 3, this is a chiddush of the Taz Rabbeinu David Halevi. Okay, one of the famous commentators on the Shulchan Aruch. In the big Shulchan Aruch, you'll see it. It's on the left side. Okay, depends which part of the page it is, but it's usually on the. He writes the following, also novelty in the chiddush of why we wear yarmulke. He says the following. He doesn't go into why we originally wore a yarmulke, but what is its status today? And since today all Jews wear yarmulkes, and that is an identification tag of a Jew, therefore it now falls under the premises of b'chukeseim leisei leichu, considered to be going on the statutes of the Gentiles. So he actually holds that wearing yarmulke today is a biblical obligation, not rabbinical and not custom. The Alte Rebbe so far, even tznius is only rabbinical. We agree that it's rabbinical. An obligation, but rabbinical. Here, the Taz makes it even go up an ante and says that it's now biblical, since it's something that we are accustomed, all Jews are accustomed to wear. It's the identification of a Jew, and therefore it's biblically forbidden to walk around without a yarmulke. The Alte Rebbe records this opinion as well. So the Alte Rebbe here brings, these are 4 opinions he brings, but 3 opinions he brings. One of them is custom, one of them is rabbinical, and one of them is biblical.
Sephardim don't necessarily wear it.
Which Sephardim? I never saw the chief rabbi walking around without a yarmulke. Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu or Bais Yosef. So we're going to go into different communities. Yeah, we will go into different communities and different customs in different areas. Let's not forget the Taz and the Alte Rebbe were both more speaking Ashkenazi Jews. We will definitely find, if a Mizrahi country, this was not the custom there, then obviously it wouldn't enter into B'chul K'sein Le'Salechu in that country. K'sein Le'Salechu is territorial based. So, it changed geographically from, according to community custom. Another reason that's brought down in the Moreh Nevuchim, the Taz likewise, the Taz brings down the name of the Nevuchim, the Rambam, is that the Shechin, just the pressure that rests on all of our skulls, right? I remember a certain amount of pounds rests on our skulls. We don't feel it, but it does. So the Moreh Nevuchim writes that there's also the Shechina that rests on our heads, right? Shlomo Melech screams, do not have lacking for the oil for the Shechina. This is the Shechina that rests on us, and therefore we cover our head out of respect for the Shechina that's on top of us. That's like a side reason of fear of heaven. One is to show our awe of heaven, and this is more of a twist of that. It's due to the Shechina that's actually resting on us. Okay, let's move on to when must a yarmulke be worn? Is it always? And this, of course, we're going to go back now to the original. What is the halacha? What is the minhag? What things used to be. So in previous times, it's clear that it was only viewed as an obligation to wear the yarmulke when you are either A, saying Hashem's name, like a pasuk, or you are, according to some opinions, when you're entering a shul. That was the only time it was viewed as an obligation. Even the Taz and the Alte Rebbe, who now say it's an obligation, don't forget, it's now an obligation because everyone wears it. So therefore, it's now a place of tznius, it's therefore the way of Jews versus Gentiles. But we all agree back in the day this wasn't the case. So back in the day, the only time a person was actually halachically obligated to wear a yarmulke was when they would say a bracha, and according to some opinions, when you would enter into a shul. And this is what you see still commonly today among some communities. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, and they should forgive me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the Syrian communities, maybe Gush Chalav, Aleppo, and communities of the sword in Syria, it was common practice not to wear a yarmulke, and only when they entered a shul would they put their yarmulke on. Now, I don't know how much this was, as they say, al das chacham, in accordance to the blessing of the sages of that time, but definitely from the letter of the law perspective, that was something acceptable, that it was only required, at least once upon a time, when entering a shul or saying a bracha. It's not, I wouldn't compare it the same way because, again, this is a matter that originally was under, it wasn't under such a broad obligation. But nonetheless, practically, it's not something, even if we want to argue that even today it's not an obligation, not like the Alte Rebbe and the Taz Poskim, nonetheless, we all agree that it's something that, carries Jewish pride, and it's not something that we would tell people to let go.
You mean wearing a kippah as opposed to wearing a hat?
Very good question. So we have a section here, what is a veiled yarmulke? Now, I've been asked a lot of times, can I wear a skull, like a baseball cap? So it's interesting because the baseball cap covers, reason one of modesty. It covers reason two of fear of heaven. It's between me and God. I'm having something in my head. That's why I'm wearing it. But it doesn't really cover the idea of separating you from a Gentile, as Gentiles also wear hats. But I have been told, someone once told me that if you ever look how Jews wear their baseball caps, it's very different than Goyim. Any truth to that? You haven't seen anything from that. So it's a different style. He said you can tell a Jew in a baseball game, you can tell a Jewish fan in a baseball wearing a cap from a guy. Now you say you can't.
Now there's a style that
Anyway, so let's say you can. Bottom line is that this is the practice, how we answer the idea of setting you from a Gentile. Is it's hard to explain how that is fulfilled here, but definitely that is something that is done. There's a story with Rabbi Marash, who at a time of need, that's what he did. And when a cap, he wore a toupee. But the idea is we do find that in times of need, we definitely do compromise on the third reason all the way. We don't walk around without a yarmulke, but we can use an alternative, alternative head covering.
Also, basically means when you're putting on your tefillin, you have to be careful to keep your yarmulke on again.
Say it again?
When you're putting on your tefillin, you should
Based on the first reason of the Alte Rebbe, right? But that was right. So I said originally it was just midas chassidus, fin 4 amas. But based on the Alte Rebbe's reason in his later version of the Shulchan Aruch of modesty, we said it should never be removed. So listen, if you have to, you have to. If that's the only way you're going to get your tefillin on, then that's what you got to do. But not to yarmulke, tefillin, yarmulke back. And I agree with you. That should not be done. Okay, let's do a few questions here. So I understand today we walk around with the yarmulke. It's a minhag Yisrael. It's an obligation due to that and due to various reasons. What about when you go to sleep? Do you have to wear a yarmulke when you are sleeping? So you have some people who, when you go to bed, is that the proper thing to do? So once again, this is not a matter that we really have a clear mention in the Shulchan Aruch, but we do have a clear mention in the later Poskim, the Shlo, the Rabbi, and the Mishnah Brura, all right. That one should wear a yarmulke even while sleeping. This is not, in fact, we don't even find this in Chassidish Sfarim. As I mentioned, it's the Shla, the Mishnah Brura who brings it down, and that this applies even to children. And it's because of this that a lot of people are careful to have a special sleeping yarmulke, which is extra large so it doesn't fall off the head. It's that sleeping with an uncovered head attracts the klipos to it at night. He said covering the head keeps. Remember, we discussed that all clothing is an armaket, it's a protective light. There's klipos around. We have bas melch to wash hands in the morning. So having the head covered, it prevents from getting different klipos into our brains, which we don't want. So okay. Based on everything we discussed, the Mishnah Brura writes that just like we said it's usher to mention Hashem's name without a yarmulke, so to learning Torah, connecting with God is usher without a yarmulke on. Now what about thinking Torah without a yarmulke? Now where would this take place? Where would you be without a yarmulke that you could think Torah? If I'm in the shower, I can't think Torah in the shower. It has nothing to do with the yarmulke business. Whether I'm wearing one or not wearing one, you can't think Torah in the shower. So where would I have a case? You can't think Torah inside the mikveh. However, let's say you're in the changing room. In the changing room, you have a few seconds where the yarmulke is off and dunk. If you're not taking off your yarmulke before you dunk, we'll go into that soon. But I'll give you another case. You're at the beach. You're in the water. You're in a swimming pool. You're not wearing your yarmulke in the swimming pool. Can you think Torah? Can you talk to someone in Torah? So to learn Torah without a head covering is no good. But to think Torah is mutter. There is no... To think Torah is mutter, and therefore it was customary. It's said about the Talmid Chachamim, different tzaddikim, that when they would get a haircut, which of course you needed to have your yarmulke off when you're getting a haircut. Let's say it would take 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it took, cut, and it didn't prevent them from doing so. A famous story recorded in the Seid Hadayos of the Baal Shem Tov is regarding the Shapira brothers of Slavita. The Shapira brothers of Slavita, they were in charge of the Slavita printing press. If you take a look at some old Gemaras, you will still see that they were printed by the Slavita printing press. And that was one of the two major publishing houses in the 1800s, or maybe late 1700s. I believe it was early 1800s. That was Russia. Russia?
Russia proper.
I believe it was Russia, yes. I believe it was Russia proper. And so the other one was Vilna. There was Slavita and there was Vilna. They were the two, I think, the two only printing presses run by Jews. And a major, there was a major rift that erupted between a Shas Slavita versus Shas Vilna. Basically, Vilna printed Shas in a certain year. Let's just throw out there 1810, whatever it was. And the way it works in Jewish custom is that even though in the Talmud this doesn't really have any discussion, but practically the Rishonim and Poskim all right, that we give someone a freedom of printing for a certain number of years. We give him the monopoly of printing that book for a certain number of years in order so we can make back his money. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is that if I print something, okay, I made 1,000 copies and I spent $10,000, put my livelihood on stake. I went into debt for this in order for me to make money, and someone said, hey, that's great, but I have a much greater, and he went and he printed 1,000 of his new styles, so now I'm bankrupt. So in order to prevent this, what do? They gave a certain amount of years, sometimes 5, sometimes 15, where no one else was allowed to print this work. So Vilna Publishing House went ahead and printed the Shas. And I'm getting mixed up. There's also two sides to the story. It could be I'm taking the Vilna side now, but I don't remember. But in any event, versus Slavita. And a lot of Poskim, Dayanim of that time, ruled like the Vilna printing house against the Slavita brothers. And in fact, some of them, they say some of them put them actually in Chayim for not listening. That happened afterwards, like a year or two afterwards. They were the grandchildren of Pinchas Karatzer, the Pinchas of Karatz, the great student of the Baal Shem Tov. And Horowitz is the last name. And they basically, there was a worker in their factory who was found dead, but committed suicide, but was told to the Russian government that the Slavita brothers killed him. So they were basically they were tortured, and they were put in prison under capital punishment, threat of capital punishment for what happened until the investigation would be finished. So after the whole thing was decided, they felt no, not enough evidence wasn't, they decided they would get a flacking. And they would get a flacking. Basically, the flacking was that there would be a row of soldiers on each side, 2 rows, and the 2 brothers would have to walk through, and the soldiers would whip them. If this was like for 50 or 100 soldiers on each side, would be whipping them as they're walking through. So the story goes like this, that as they were walking through the 2 rows, one of the brothers' yarmulke fell. And he refused to move without his yarmulke. He refused to continue walking without his yarmulke in his head. And he continued getting lashed. Until someone had mercy and gave him his yarmulke. But this is a story of that they had this mysterious nefesh, ad kadei kach, that they refused to walk without the yarmulke, even in the face of getting hit. There's a famous nigun of the Slavita brothers. It's called Nigun Slavita, that's what it's called. It's called the Mysterious Nefesh nigun also. Mendel Fudefas was one of his top nigun that he would sing, and when he would sing it at Fabregans, students say he would always cry. He would always cry when he was singing it. Anyways, I won't do a demo for you right now, but it's a very moving nigun. Okay, children, we already mentioned the stories in the Talmud, and it's recorded in the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avram, and all the Poskim, that it is proper also for children to cover their head. This is not something that begins by adulthood or bar mitzvahhood. Even children are to do so, and it brings them a fear of heaven, as we've already mentioned in the story, and as the Alte Rebbe rules in the Shulchan Aruch. So that's a source for children wearing it. Now, from what age? That's the big question. So, we know for sure children wear yarmulkes. They're to wear it. It's very important. But from what age should they wear it? So, when the Rebbe was asked this question, what the Rebbe answered is that from age 3, it should be, we're very particular. Usually, chinuch is when the child is mentally mature. So when he begins understanding what a yarmulke is, so that's when you would educate him in this mitzvah. So for one child, it may be 6 years old. Another child may be 4 years old. Every child is different. But here, we have a tradition that from 3 years old, it's not just it's a tradition amongst all Klal Yisrael, but if you went back 100 years ago, or maybe 200 years ago, people didn't know this. This wasn't a common practice. From 3 years old, we already begin many of the education mitzvahs of a child, even before they have reached Havana, before they've reached mental maturity. And one of them is the yarmulke, that we make sure from at least that age that they will have their yarmulke. Many do so beforehand. They put on a yarmulke on the child beforehand. No obligation. So as soon as the male child, as soon as, the baby boy is born, mazel tov, and the midwife says it's a boy, you don't have to run right away, but the yarmulke right away has to have it a second. Chinuch, no, it doesn't. That's not min hadin. The hakpad is from 3 years old, but many are particular even beforehand, even before age 3, and some do so from when the child's born. We know that the Rebbe Rashab in his tzava, in his will that he wrote regarding his son, the Rebbe Rayatz, he mentions there that the child should have a yarmulke. In that specific case, he wasn't saying as a general directive, but in that, he was saying for his family they should have a yarmulke put on right away. However, practically the custom of the world is not to be makbid. And as we said, the main thing is from 3 years old, and many begin beforehand as well. Okay, what's with the hand placing on instead of the yarmulke? And we have a few case examples here. You can walk to your yarmulke. It's still around. Your yarmulke is not lost, but you will have to walk without a head covering towards your yarmulke. We said before, already from the Shulchan Aruch, that there's a specific inyan not to walk 4 amos without a yarmulke, even back then, all the more so today. In the Shulchan Aruch, that although in general we rule that a hand does not help to be a covering for your body, as anything that's part of yourself cannot act as an internal. It has to be something from the outside, and therefore, seemingly, we should say here as well that placing a hand on your head should be worthless. Nonetheless, he says that so you can walk to the yarmulke with your hand on your head, and that'll be instead of the yarmulke. For anything else to put on, you could put your yarmulke on your head in such a case. However, your hand on your head, yes. However, in the same source, and also there's a different source. This is in chapter 2, halacha 6, and in chapter 91, halacha 4. The Alte Rebbe emphasized, however, is that there's one thing that the yarmulke doesn't help for. We said before there's 4 reasons why we wear a yarmulke. So putting a hand on your head covers the modesty aspect. The modesty aspect is don't see my head. Well, my hand prevents you from seeing my head. I don't care about the argument, it's part of your body. Whatever the thing, do you see my head right now? You don't see my head, so I'm fine. So that covers the first thing. So you can walk around like that if you need to, if you don't have anything else. However, to say a bracha, let's say I want to drink now, that you can't do, because there it doesn't act as a real item that's on your head. It's part of your body, so therefore he rules for a blessing it wouldn't work. Or let's say to walk around in a shul, where the idea is you have something that shows fear of heaven, it wouldn't necessarily work, that the person would actually need to have a real yarmulke on their head for the sake of doing so. However, another person's hand would work. So let's say you have your speaker who's not religious yet, unfortunately, and you want to share with him a can of Coke or a can of beer. And you don't feel so comfortable going to give him, he's going to drink like a shegitz. I'm talking here about Torah with him or whatever we're talking about, and he's open to it. I don't feel that he's drinking any yarmulke. He can put, that he's not saying a bracha. So you can put your hand on his head, if he lets, and he'll say the bracha, that's not a problem. And then your yarmulke as well, right? There's a few ways out, but having someone else's hand on your head works for the bracha, while having your own hand does not. So to summarize, a person's hand as a head cover in a time of need works in terms of, for that you need another person's circumference of the skull. So he has huge yarmulkes. That's like a huge, if you ever notice some of the, let's say Rabbi Feinstein's, it was yesterday, you ever notice the heavy yarmulke he would wear? There's a famous picture with him in the summer camp. He has a huge yarmulke. It says a specific name. It's a huge yarmulke. It's like a hat. It's almost like a, no, not Bukhari. Litvish. It's an old Litvish type of yarmulke. Shlomo Kluger was from Lita. And so this is how he held that the yarmulke has to be, this would be too small. This is already, what are you, modern or something? What are you? So this is how he held. Bottom line is like this. The way we hold is that it should cover a nice amount of the head. It should cover, one should, the definition given by the Igros Moshe, Moshe Feinstein on this, is that while we don't go to the extent of halaf chashleim, which requires literally, almost the whole circumference of the head, but that it should be able to be seen from all sides. So no matter, Moshe analyzes it from the halachic perspective, since the idea is, as the Taz says, to show that you're a Jew and to differentiate you. So we want people to be able to see it from all sides. So people can't see it from all sides. If it's a tiny yarmulke that when you hear, people from here can't tell, then it's no good.
The silver dollar pancake approach is not acceptable.
What is a silver dollar?
You know what it,
Oh, you mean
like about like
bottle
this.
cut? No, yes. Right. So it all depends. If he has a very small head, then maybe.
No, assuming it's more or less normal size.
For a little baby, a little. Right. No. So it wouldn't be good, especially if he has hair that then covers over. It's under my hair. The yarmulke is so small. Obviously, that wouldn't be good. And this is where Moshe discusses it. Moshe analyzes it from a very, halachic perspective. What are the reasons behind it? When does the size compromise? So if it can't be seen from all sides, that people look at you, then it compromises one of the major reasons today, and therefore would be no good.
I had heard a rule that the radius has to be at least 4 fingers width, but that's not anywhere.
I don't have it written down here. It's not part of the
Okay,
classical
I can't
approach in
give
the
you a
Poskim.
citation as to-
I wouldn't. I don't know where that's from. There is no of circumference. What people just say is regarding how much of the head it should cover. Exactly. Exactly. It's not possible. It's all relative. A kippah sruga is not problematic in terms of it going against any of these 3 reasons we brought. No, 100% it doesn't. Well, the reason why some people avoid, so you're bringing up a different issue with yarmulkes, which is basically today, a lot of times yarmulkes, they are a showcase for representation of a certain sect of Jewry that you say you belong to. So for example, if, let's say, Lahavdil Havdalas, there's a certain fringe community that's begun wearing very specific type of yarmulkes to establish their belief and what they believe in. So if I would wear the rainbow yarmulke, which they believe in, then it's a kosher yarmulke, but I am, placing myself, I'm telling the world I'm part of this group. So the kippah sruga yarmulke, chashem, not to compare it to that, but nonetheless, it does, represent a certain type of approach of Judaism, which not everyone in Judaism agrees with, and that's okay, but that's why some people avoid wearing it. It's not because it's not a kosher yarmulke, it's a kosher yarmulke, but people may avoid wearing it because they don't want to affiliate themselves specifically with this philosophy. That's all.
I have seen a Manchester Union kippah.
Right.
Right. The soccer.
Yeah, they make all types. Today, yarmulkes are big. They have MAGA yarmulkes, Make America Great Again yarmulkes. They have, all types. So,
and there's no issue to sneeze by the design in and of itself.
No. It's all kosher.
The issue is on the covering.
Exactly. As long as it can be seen from all sides, it's kosher. But again, a lot of times yarmulkes, they exemplify political, affiliation, and that's why, a lot of people don't want to wear,
Almost any kippah means a certain affiliation, if you really want to get down to it.
Right, yeah, I guess so.
Well, you believe it.
Right. A lot of people do. Yeah, a lot of people, it's an unfortunate reality. People, judge you. They say, don't judge me by my yarmulke. But at the same time, it happens to be that yarmulke, it's a dress code. It's a dress code, which shows, often what people think, what your belief system may be or may not be. In any event, okay, so that's a little off subject.
So therefore, you could wear a hat without a kippah on.
It would definitely fulfill the reasons, especially if it's a Jewish hat, especially if it's a Crunch Lubavitch hat, everyone knows what you are. So it fulfills everything that is required. Unless we will get to that there is an inyan of having 2 coverings. That's another subject. He's working in the government circles, but he really feels bad. He's going to walk around without a yarmulke, so he wants to make himself a camouflage yarmulke, a glass yarmulke, a clear plastic yarmulke, something no one will notice, an invisible yarmulke. Or a toupee, nobody will know the difference. He's wearing a toupee, and people think it's his regular hair, but really this is his yarmulke. The toupee is his yarmulke. So the Poskim discuss this, and they say that since one of the main reasons of wearing the yarmulke is for the purpose that other people will know that you're Jewish, so therefore it is not a valid head covering. This is the ruling of the Pri Megadim. The Mishnah Berurah records it, and another place can also record it, because people can't tell. It's marasayan. On the other hand, if you go by the other two reasons, tznius and have fear of heaven, you still have something on your head. So 2 out of the 3 reasons are being fulfilled by it. Bottom line is that people have relied on this approach. The Rebbe Marash is a story dating back to him once, relied on this when he had to travel to a health resort and they wouldn't allow anyone to wear any head coverings in the resort for whatever reason. That was the policy. So he was, the way the story goes, that he was together with a famous Litvisher guy, and it doesn't say the name of the guy, the Litvisher Rosh Hashiva. He wanted to see what the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe would do, Rebbe Marash. He took off his hat, took off his yarmulke, no problem, put it aside, and ready to walk in. He was shocked. And he felt so uncomfortable, he didn't know what to do. He sees the Rebbe Marash walk in, he says, okay, I'm going to be like a fool, stand out here by myself. This is for health purposes. I didn't come here to have fun. So he does the same thing. He takes everything off, just like the Rebbe Marash. And there were a few strange things he saw the Rebbe Marash do. After they finished, in the resort, he asked the Rebbe Marash, I don't understand, the Lubavitch is so holy and this. How did it not bother you just take off the yarmulke? I never took off my yarmulke. This is a toupee. He was wearing a toupee. So the Rebbe Marash then asked him, how did you take off your yarmulke? But nonetheless, we see in a time of need, it is a valid head covering.
Right, but now, in some places like in France,
Baseball cap. That's why baseball cap, sure.
but even though that takes it away from Jewish.
Right, so that's what I said before. I said earlier that even though it loses the third reason, it's kind of hard to argue how it still gains the third reason. Nonetheless, as I said, in a time of need, in practice, we do that. We do practice that. It is done in order to, for demanding situations. But definitely in a place like a lot of times, the intimidation is self-imposed. Okay, those people who work, in government circles or in certain businesses, they feel that they won't be successful without the yarmulke on. It's nonsense in today's society. Today's society, just the opposite. People are forcing you to give special privileges if you have any smell of being, in any way being, and any racism may be against you. It's almost like you get special privileges today if you're part of a small minority group in the United States. So I don't think there's not much to fear about wearing a yarmulke. It's a lot of it. That's what Moshe answered to one individual, and he said, I have the job. If I wear a yarmulke, so we told him, listen, if that's really the case, then I can give you a heter in this time, take case of great loss, to work the job without a covering. But nonetheless, what Moshe told him is that I don't really buy your story. I don't really believe that this is true, and therefore a person should not surrender to his self-intimidations. Otherwise, Yartzeit was yesterday, Moshe Feinstein.
That's similar to the issue of the beard. People said I couldn't get a job out here. I said, but now we won't get a beard.
Right. Okay, in the mikvah, in a bathhouse, do you have to cover your head? So this question is discussed in the Shari Tshuva, and there in chapter 2, this chapter, and there he says that you do not. There is no obligation to have a head covering in a bathhouse, or when you're in the swimming pool, or when you are in the ocean, or walking to your clothing. You do not have to leave your yarmulke, measure exactly where the last wave would come to and leave your yarmulke right there before you go into the ocean, and then if another wave comes, it'll take it into the ocean. No, you can leave it wherever you want and walk into the river without your yarmulke on your head. However, there is a debate mentioned there regarding if there is an act of piety involved in still wearing Sharf, a famous Paisik who wrote the Simla Chadasha, that not only is it not required, but there's actually no even Midas Chasidus involved to walk with a yarmulke in such a situation. Famously, I believe, of Shepsel. There are Paiskim who do defend and saying that, that there is an act of meticulousness involved in nonetheless wearing it, and some do so. So basically, preference. If you want to wear a yarmulke, we shouldn't say, this person's a fanatic. Wait till he's so fine, he wants to do it, he'll do it. But anyone who's not doing it, they're not doing anything wrong. And as I said, this is defended, and there's even a debate if there's an act of piety involved in being machmir to it. It is told that the Hillel Paracher, famous chassid of Tzemach Tzedek, that he would toivel in the mikveh with his yarmulke on, and that he wouldn't, symmetrically, he would back into his yarmulke. And the story goes that one time his yarmulke moved away, and he couldn't find it, and he wouldn't get out of the water, and he almost entered into a great sakana. But this is a pillow parasha. Is a very different person than most people.
The Middle Rebbe or the
Tzemach Tzedek, Middle Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek, yeah.
There's a mice also by the Frierdiker Rebbe by nighttime in yeshiva.
Yeah, that's sleeping, regarding sleeping. Right. That's a little different. By sleeping, the Poskim all bring that you should sleep with a yarmulke. By a bathhouse, the Poskim will say you don't have to. Okay. And now, just because we said you don't have to wear a yarmulke doesn't mean you should walk around and stroll around without a yarmulke on. Once you get out of the water, put a yarmulke on. But the idea is that to go into the ocean, you don't have to wear it. An interesting question. We discussed before about offering fruit to your friend, and he'll, giving him your hand as your yarmulke, as his yarmulke. But what if, you're not doing that to someone who will eat it without a yarmulke, without a bracha? Do you transgress lefnei iver leisitin michshol? Don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind by giving him food. Now you can't say, well, I didn't tell him to eat it. All I did was give him food. I didn't tell him to eat it, so why am I an accomplice? That's like saying I didn't tell him to shoot. All I did was sell him the gun. Of course. So that's no argument. So in truth, it is explicitly written in the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 169, halacha 2, that you're not allowed to give food to someone who will not say a bracha, and you have to tell him to say a bracha. It says if someone who doesn't wash their hands for bread, you can't give him bread. So you have to first tell him, please wash your hands. So the Poskim discuss, what do we do today? Back in the day, you have to understand, this was the shtetl. Everyone knew this was the accepted standard, and anyone who didn't follow it, it was the religionists were on the top of society of Jewry, and the rebels were the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. They had no say. But unfortunately, today it's very different, and we don't have control. It's something to drink and cause a lot of problems. Basically, the Poskim today say that lechatchila, the best thing is that to try to influence them and tell them you don't want to wear a yarmulke and say a bracha over the food. But if you need a safe face from an embarrassing situation that can cause Chilul Hashem, then you can go ahead and give them the food anyways. This was the ruling of the Shevet Levi, that believe also work. So it was a religious crowd of employees, but with a non-religious crowd of what we can call their managers. The managers were non-religious, and all the employees are basically religious. And when it came Purim time, so it's customary that people switch around mishloach manos. So it's common courtesy that the employees give something to their managers. So the question erupted amongst the different co-workers, are we allowed to give actual mishloach manos? Because we're giving them food, they're going to eat the food without a bracha, without a yarmulke. And the bottom line was, I wrote them a whole tshuva explaining how in a situation, if there is fear of, if this is common courtesy, then you're allowed to be lenient, go ahead and do so. But it's at the same time, you don't have to give them food. You can also buy a product. You can give a product and give them something. But in other words, we don't avoid being makar of someone or sharing basic relations because of this issue. All right. Okay, what about women? Do women have to wear yarmulke? So in fact, we say, women shouldn't wear yarmulke. They shouldn't wear tefillin, they shouldn't wear tzitzit, they shouldn't wear yarmulke. So the truth is like this. We do not find any source discussing a woman wearing a head covering because all married women have to wear head coverings. So why do they need two? They anyways have to wear a head covering. But what about women who are not married? So as we know, the custom is today, even amongst the Yemenites, that the non-married women, single women, do not wear head coverings. And is that okay? So the answer is yes, 100% it's okay. They never accepted themselves only once they get married. Once they get married, however, they do have to have a head covering just because they're married, but even in the privacy of their home, if they plan on saying a bracha, they have to wear a head covering while they do so. They have to have something on their head before saying a bracha.
Non-married women?
Don't have to. I said married. I'm sorry. Even in the privacy of their home. Not a single woman, no, but a woman who was once married. Again, let's qualify this. A woman who never got married yet, a basula, doesn't have to cover her hair according to halacha, also doesn't have to wear a head covering. A woman who does have to cover her hair according to halacha, then it's not just in public, but if she wants to say a bracha, even in private, she would need to cover her head. why you see, if you ever notice, a lot of times, there's a lot of times Sephardi women who aren't makbid in covering their heads, married women, but when they enter a shul, they will always put a head covering on. Ever notice that? Have you seen that? So that is because of this. It was always accepted in a shul, everyone covers their head, and you say a bracha, everybody covers their head, even. Depends which. That's a very.
There's some people are very angry about it.
No, but it depends which. You can't generalize all Sephardim, because you have a number of Sephardim, great Sephardi Poskim, which were great advocates of the sheitel. Just because one group is louder than the other doesn't mean the other group doesn't exist. So, I'm not blaming you. I know that is how it sounds like today, but
The argument
they are.
is that it's human hair. And
I understand. It's a different discussion. The bottom line is that while Rav Yosef did hold of the position against sheitels, Rabbi Tzion Abba Shaul and Rav Mashash and other Sephardi Gedolim did not agree with him and held that that was the preferred form of wearing head covering. So,
Preferred form.
yes, preferred form. His own daughters, Rabbi Tzion Abba Shaul, that was Shiva Prat Yosef, his own daughters wore sheitlach. So this is definitely not, for a person to say, oh, Sephardim don't hold the sheitos and Ashkenazim do, is not a true approach. It's mixed. Some Ashkenazim do and some Ashkenazim don't. Some Sephardim, some Sephardim don't. But yes, vocally, those who are most vocal, I agree with you, it's the Sephardim. Yeah, I agree. But, as unfortunately in society, those who make the most noise, those are, we view them, wow, It's like someone told me, I met with a doctor the other day, he says, why are so many religious Jews anti-vax? I'm like, what are you talking about? Most religious Jews vaccinate. There's a small vocal group that doesn't do it, but that doesn't negate the 90% plus who does. So I didn't know. Okay. What time is it?
9 o'clock, it's on tonight.
Ooh, it's exactly 9 o'clock. Okay, but okay, we will finish this next week then. We have a few more things left. We're almost done. A few more things left, and we will begin next week in Meretz Hashem, chapter 4, chapter 3, Siman Gimel, which is going to discuss, it's about 17 seifim, discuss everything that has to do with the bathroom, plus some other miscellaneous subjects that are scattered in there, that will be coming up in Meretz Hashem.